Hello, everyone. I think we started a little bit earlier. That's fine, I guess. Hello to everyone who's popping in. Hello, hello. So I guess you guys can just see the the main thing here. All right, I guess we're starting early. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Today, sorry, I keep hitting my headphones. Today we are going to be doing a whole live stream about going over the basics of eyes. This is March to the basics, so we are going to be doing an entire month of just going back to the basics, so starting with eyes, and then next I believe is hands. No, next is just general anatomy. Then it's hands, and then it's feet. Yes, that's right. I'm just trying to remember the order. But yes, so we are going to be doing eyes today. And before I get going, let's talk a bit about, because I realized that we don't really talk much about the studio, so let's talk a little bit about that. Though we do all of these free things, like we upload our videos, and we have some free blogs that you can read on our website, the link down below. We also do offer classes, and you can check out all the things that we offer in our description as well. We also have a Patreon page that you can check out, which has a ton of free, cool things that you can, well, not free, a ton of cool things that you can check out, such as, my working files, and some discounts on our lessons, which I teach, and, who is in the chat? Alyssa should be in the chat, but she is another one of the lovely teachers. But yeah, so that's kind of all about us, but let's just get going, because I don't want to spend too long plugging everything. So, eyes. Hey, hello. This is so helpful. Thank you for doing it. Of course. And hello, Pex. Welcome in. Hello, Kiara Draws. And Elena. Hello and hello. Oh, and just as a reminder that these are new times that we are streaming at, so we do want to, because we're shifting it a little bit to kind of match our time zone as well, so it's better for the people within our time zone, as well as trying out a new time, see how we like it. Okay. So, for the poll from this week, what we heard was a lot of you guys wanting to know how to draw eyes from different angles. That was the number one thing. I'll go over a couple of things when it comes to drawing eyes. But, yes, hello, Alyssa. But yes, so here's one thing that you kind of see a lot, right? When you are drawing just eyes in general, right? You see a lot of people who are like anime eyes, right? It's like, this is a girl's eye, right? And then this is a boy's eye, right? And it's like, one is super soft and one is super hard and angular. No. Can it be like that? Yes, absolutely. But that is not necessarily true all of the time, right? Sometimes, some women have harder angled eyes, some men have softer eyes, right? It's like, sometimes it's like you don't have to worry about gender locking everything, right? Eyes are eyes. We all have them, hopefully, right? If you don't, then that's fine. But we all got eyes, right? So I'm going to talk about a very general way to draw eyes rather than, going, this is how you do a girl's eye, this is how you do a guy's eye. Because, realistically, all eyes are drawn basically with the same method. So when you want to start off with an eye, especially going from different angles, the main thing we want to think about is the eyeball itself, right? Eyes are spheres. Eyeballs are spheres, right? If we think about, actually, let's do the pupil going at a different angle. So if we think of any eye, it's usually, no, it is a sphere. Did you know that these things can deflate? You know that? They're basically water balloons. They can deflate. Random facts. But all eyes are spheres. Right? It's like a marble. And that's what you want to think about when you're drawing them from different angles, because your lids, if you've ever seen a piranha plant from Mario, think of your eyelids as the lips of the piranha plant, and it's going over your eye, right? So if I take kind of like a piranha plant from Mario, Think of your eye as the inside of that. Your lids are what's closing around this eye. So think of your eyelids as a piranha plant. Right? Slenderman, that's right, he doesn't have eyes. But your eyelids will enclose around the sphere. And that will determine how you would draw the eye from a different angle. Right? So let me just draw a few different spheres. You can draw along with me if you'd like. Yahoo! Hello, Pardeep, and hello, Pex. Once again. Goodness, it must be late for you. Or super early, one or the other. So we draw a few spheres for eyes. Right? We think of this piranha plant method. Let's just draw one directly from the front. If the piranha plant's lips are going over the eye, then we'd have it enclosing around it kind of like this. Right? The rest of the eyeball is being hidden by the quote-unquote lips, or your eyelids. And there should be a tear duct on one side, or there are two tear ducts, but one is shaped more like a C, and the other is more like a V. Your upper lid always goes over top of your bottom lid. Right? But always thinking of it, it's the middle of the day for you, Pex. That's good. Right? So when you have it from the front, again, that piranha plant, think of its lips kind of going over the front, right? You could also have those, oh, there's a creature from Legend of Zelda that I think has an eye in its mouth. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's one of those two. From the side, right? Remember, the eye is always a sphere. Right? From the side, if you were to take that piranha plant mouth, if I were to draw it kind of over here, it kind of ends in the middle there. Right? So same deal with an eye. Kind of have your eyelashes and your eyelid closing over the top, ends in the center here, and opens back up at the bottom. Another thing that I always see is like, oh, if you're drawing a woman's eyes, it should have eyelashes, and a men's eyes should not have eyelashes. Check your eyes. You got eyelashes if you're a boy. Nobody doesn't have eyelashes. It's just that sometimes they're like, oh, let's draw a woman's eyes with more pronounced eyelashes. You can do that for sure, but men have eyelashes too. Don't forget your eyelashes. Your upper eyelashes, up on the top of your eyes, tend to be a lot thicker. You can kind of cross them over like this as well. Almost like V's. Those tend to make nicer looking eyelashes. But they always curve, don't forget that. You have your eyelashes are very feminine. That's fine. We all got eyelashes though. My eyelashes are quite thin. So I don't have very thick eyelashes, but I do wish I did. But to each their own. I'll talk a bit about pupils in a second as well. Just know that pupils should not be drawn directly at the edge of the iris. They should be drawn farther back like this. So I'll do a little diagram for that as well. Right, but again, they should keep this curve. This curve should always be kept. Right? Keep that curve in there. You can almost have it like a V or an A off to the side there. And the same thing if we have the piranha plant going from a third of the way. Kind of like that. We should have the eyelid also covering it partially. right? I'm trying to do this fast so we can get into the more fun bits of eyes. Because, you know, like, doing them a little more realistically tends to get kind of boring, I think. So, now, eyelashes always fan out, right? If you're doing something a little more realistic, generally you don't want your eyelashes to be like this. They tend to look a little bit nicer if you have them fanning out this way in multiple directions. So can you do this? Yes, but it feels flat. Right? That's kind of like a way that you can do your eyelashes. But always remember that your lower lashes tend to be a lot thinner compared to your upper ones. And they get thinner as you go towards the corners of your eyes. And eyelashes are also fairly random. So, like, you don't want to have, like, you can, definitely, if they're a little more cartoony, you can definitely have some more rhyme or reason to them. Or, like, rules to them. But, like, more realistic eyelashes, you can kind of just, again, you can do the crossing method. But they should be as random as you can possibly get them. But always remember that your eyes should wrap around the sphere. Right? They should wrap around. Right? Because they are a sphere. It's an eyeball, and you're wrapping, like, a piranha plant's mouth around the eyes. Your eyelids, think of it as a piranha plant. Right? That's the #1 takeaway that I have. Think of it as a piranha plant. And when your eyes close, that's the piranha plant's mouth closing. Right? Or a Cheep Cheep. Some other kind of Mario character. Alright. And the next thing I want to talk about is these pupils. One thing that people don't always seem to get is that pupils do not actually sit directly on the ends of the eye. If you've never seen the anatomy of an eye before, you might actually know this if you've seen doll artists make eyes, because they do it a very, very, a little more of a realistic way. Your iris, or the colored part of your eye, goes a little bit away from the top of the eyeball, right? So it rests on top of it, but think of, like, if you put, like, think of an egg, right? When you hard boil an egg, you have the yolk that kind of sits on top of the white of the egg. That's kind of what your iris is like. And if that's the rest of the eyeball there. And your pupil, the black part of your eye, sits directly still on this area of your eye. Like, kind of directly on top of the quote-unquote white of your eye, because it's a hole, right? It's not like, it's what lets in the most light. If you've ever shined a light directly at your eyes, don't do that. But people usually do that to check for concussions. But if you shine a light directly at it, you notice that your pupil gets smaller. That's because it's letting in less light, letting in more light, right? The pupil is super open when it's dark because it needs to let in more light. But when it's super bright out, your pupil shrinks to, like, let in less light, right? Biology class is coming in handy, indeed. Indeed. I quite found that I loved biology class. I didn't take it again after grade 10. For those of you who don't know, grade 10 is when you're about 16, 15 to 16, I think. Yeah, that's about right. I stopped taking it after that age because I was like, I didn't have room for it. But I did like biology. So when you're drawing your iris, let me actually just write this down. If you join our Discord channel, you'll be able to, oh, you know what? Let me just pull that up then. If you join our Discord channel, you'll be able to see all of these, and you'll be able to download it for free on our Discord. If you want it in high res, then you can join our Patreon, plus my working file, and you can join the Patreon. But all of this will be uploaded onto the Discord afterwards if you would like to have another look at it and keep all of my notes. So the iris rests on top of the eyeball. Pupil is a hole. Does not rest on top. So when you are drawing any eye, this is a pet peeve of mine. When you are drawing any eye, doesn't matter what style it's in, and if it has a pupil in it, you got to make sure that the pupil does not rest directly on top of. Oops. You got to make sure that the pupil does not rest directly on top of the iris. Okay, there we go. Right, so if your eye is kind of from the side, this should always be curved as well because of our iris. The pupil in the back should be resting in the back as well. Most of the time, if it's not directly in the front, if the eye isn't directly facing the front, then the pupil does not generally show up directly in the middle of the eye. It kind of skews off to the side a little bit, right? It's kind of hard to test for yourself because, like, you're not really looking directly at the camera. You're always looking directly at yourself in a mirror. But if you were to take a photo of yourself, you might be able to see your pupils like that. I'm trying to, like, the only example that I remember seeing this in, like, what the example of the pupils from Naruto. I don't remember the exact screenshot it was, but, like, if you kind of see, it's from later in the series, that you should be able to kind of see some close-ups of Naruto's eyes and his pupils in the back rather than in the front. Right? A lot of anime actually does do this, where the pupil is in the back rather than in the front. I believe this is stream 5? Yes, it is. Just saving the file there. Alright. So this is me trying to get all of the, like, not so interesting fun parts out of the way. The very, very hard anatomical things out of the way, right? Because there's a lot of different things you can talk about with eyes. Let's do a couple more angles with the eyes, though. Throughout this whole process, by the way, I know I'm talking a lot, but throughout this whole thing, if you have any requests for anything you'd like me to talk about in terms of eyes, I will do my best. I'll see your requests, and I will gladly try to do a mini explanation on each one. But yes, so if you have anything specific about eyes you'd like me to talk about, I can definitely do that for you within the 2 hours that we have. I'm planning to end on me just kind of drawing different kinds of eyes for the ending, showing you different ways you can render eyes, different kind of styles, because I love drawing in different styles, even though I've been told I have a very distinct style. I like drawing in different styles a lot. Now, there's a couple of angles that people find are really, really tricky when it comes to eyes, and that's above and below. But once again, it is kind of the same. Can I do this? Ooh, yes I can. Let's go. So, once again, it is thinking of the piranha plant. If we think of the piranha plant from above, right, when we draw the eyes from above, the piranha plant's lips will kind of curve downwards like this. It'll look more like a smile when we draw it from above. Coloring is always a pain. I'll definitely do that then. I love coloring eyes. I don't get to do fancy ones often. I know Alyssa loves to do crazy fancy eyes, and I never get the chance to. But my eyes tend to be pretty simple. But I love doing that too. Right? So a piranha plant, when it goes downwards, it's the same deal with the eyes. When they're looking downwards, the eyes themselves should also be looking downwards, along with the pupil, or the iris and the pupil. Regardless of if they're happy or not. Should kind of be pointing downwards. Again, thin lashes on the bottom, thicker ones up top. Your eyelashes should kind of fan out, but they will cover your eye a little bit, right? Drawing them up here just doesn't make much sense, because then it's going to be like they're sticking to the top of your eyelid, and that doesn't make any sense. So they're probably, the eyelashes, if you draw them, are probably going to be covering your eyelids a little bit, or your eyes a little bit. This will be more exaggerated as you continue. I like to draw a lot of eyelashes if I have the chance. Same deal if it's from the top. The lids of your piranha plant look almost like it's frowning. It kind of looks like he's frowning. But it's the same deal with your eyes. They will be curved upwards. Follow the curve of your sphere that you are drawing. It's kind of hard to do the bottom lash. You can just completely ignore it if you don't really want to draw it. You could draw it like this. It's a little bit wacky though, so I'm just going to completely ignore them. But again, if you're looking from below, or looking from above, let me do a 3-dimensional arrow. Oof, nice and fancy today. If you're looking down, then you want your eyes to be curved downwards. If you are looking up, let me move this. You want your eyes to be similarly curving upwards. Yep. Not quite so successful with this one. That's okay. Hi, Jessie. Hello. Good morning. Good morning to you. Drawing with the G pen at the moment. I don't know why, but this feels like good. Yeah, I use the G pen to sketch. It's the closest I can get to my pencil tool in Photoshop. But I quite like the G pen. I've always found that when I do lining, when I am working with a rougher brush, I tend to work faster than if I work with like a hard round. I guess because like my hard round is so exact that like I feel like it has to be exact. But then when it's something rougher, I'm like, I can make the lines a little bit rougher. I don't have to worry too much. So if you ever see me wanting to be as fast as possible, you'll notice me lining with the G pen or the mapping pen or something. It's midnight for you? Goodness. It's your time to make super fancy eyes today, yeah. All the notes and examples so far is super helpful. I'm good. I'm glad. But hello to everyone who's popping in. I'm so glad to see more people popping in. But yes. So, oh, one last thing. Right. Before I get into hello. Thought today was your turn. It was Alyssa's turn, but I'm taking over. You missed a week, you think. You missed last week. But I think you popped in briefly. But yeah, no, I'm taking over. Actually, I don't know if I can talk about that. That's okay. Alright. Here's one last thing. That was the second most requested thing. Hi. Here's the second most requested thing that was on the poll, which was how to draw the other eye. And I see a lot of people do that. It's like, oh my god, I draw one eye and then I can't do the other one. It's like I spend like 20 minutes on one eye and then I can't draw the other one. Why do I do that? Here's the thing. It's because you're spending 20 minutes on one eye and not starting the other one. That's what you never do, right? You don't want to go and draw like, oh, here's one eye completely and I'm working really hard on it and, oops. And it's like I'm spending so long on it and I want it to look really, really nice. Right? And then you have to draw the other one and you're like, oh, gotta make it equal. Oh no, it's too small. I am purposefully making it not look great. But, right? And you're like, I don't get why this is happening. Right? It's very simple. It's because you're drawing them not at the same time. Now the reason, when you draw anything in pairs, this includes arms, this includes legs, this includes eyes, right? If they come in pairs, you draw them at the same time, right? So let me just write it down. The other eye. Draw them at the same time. Now, I don't mean you gotta be ambidextrous and you gotta have two pencils in both hands and you gotta be drawing them at the exact same time. No. What that means is that if you draw one lid, one upper lid of one eye, you draw the upper lid of the other eye as well. Right? One piece of the eye at a time. If you draw the bottom lid, draw the bottom lid of the next eye as well. Draw the pupil. Well, this isn't the pupil. The iris, one eye, iris of the next. Pupil, pupil, eyebrow, eyebrow, and then your lashes. Right? There you go. Nice and simple. I'm kind of glad that that one didn't win out because I don't know how I would be able to turn that into a whole lesson. But yes, right? If I'm not mistaken, isn't like the realistic distance between both eyes the length of the eye, you know? You are correct. So when you are drawing the whole face, I'll write that down too in a second. Let me just write this down first. Draw. If you're wondering, I'm trying to make my writing as like clear as possible because normally I write in cursive, not like this. So, but I want to make it clear for everyone because I know some people can't read cursive, so I'm trying to make it clean. Draw upper, draw pieces. Let's make that more concise. Draw P-I-E pieces of at the same time. But yes, Pardeep is correct. When you are drawing your eyes, when they're more realistic, let me just quickly draw ahead. There's like a whole measurement of things. I'm going to go over this next week when we cover actual anatomy. But when we draw eyes, I'm breaking my own rule. We draw different eyes. This rule tends to be broken with cartooning, but with realism, generally, the width of the face is 5 eyes long. And the space between both eyes is 1 eye length. This will be another eye, this will be another eye, right? So 1 eye for each side. So generally, straight across your face, you get 1 eye per thing, right? But your head is curved, so it does feel kind of like a half eye on either side. But generally, about 5 eyes across. Alright. Oh, I guess I should have mentioned that I'm running these streams a little bit more like my art mentorship class. If you've never had... Oh! Perfect timing. Whoops, oops. 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 Close that by accident. Perfect timing. So, if you didn't know, Wing Canvas is a actual, art school. I do teach for them. Of course, these lessons are paid, but if you would like to have a proper class with me, so this is kind of being structured almost like one of my own art mentorship classes, where I get student requests and I teach them based off of that, what they request. But yes, so if you would like to check out our classes, feel free to check the link in the description where you can get classes from me and from some of our other lovely teachers like Alyssa, Faye, Arunya. You may have seen them pop up, Faye and Arunya, because they have popped up for different live streams that we've had. But yeah, I teach cartooning. Our class did its job, I guess, last year. Yeah. So I teach cartooning, I teach art mentorship. I believe I'm going to start teaching digital soon. I taught digital for a while, but I haven't had a digital class in a while. But yes, if you'd like to check those out. And if you check out our Patreon, we have a tier which gives you a really big discount on our classes if you'd like to check that out. It is limited with spots, so yeah, link in the description for everything. And if you'd like these notes afterwards, join our Discord, and I will be posting absolutely every single one of my notes that I am writing right now. You can download it, keep it, it's yours. But if you'd like my working files again, Patreon, that's where you'd get them from. So, let's get back to the actual drawing bits. So just like I'd run my art mentorship class, we are now done with all the theory. So we're going to get into the fun bits. Let's edit the canvas size so I don't delete all of this. Okay, so let me just move all of this up because I didn't want to, I don't want to hide the layer because if I do that then it might be hard to deal with. It's the most layers I've ever worked on. So, let's get into drawing some more fun eyes, right? You have, like, your realistic eyes, you stare at them, you're like, oh yeah, right? You see them every day. Oh, I mean, depending on what you do. I guess we don't really see people's eyes much anymore, do we? Unless you live with family or with someone else. But we see realistic eyes every day, right? There's a lot of different stylized eyes you can do, right? Stylized eyes tend to be more fun. That's just a fact, right? Not for everybody, but doing different eyes. Alright, let me just draw my default eye, right, that I kind of go with. Usually my younger characters have something like this. I like to stylize my bottom lid a little bit. And then, like, usually my eyes get more realistic the older the character gets. So these tend to be for younger characters, and this tends to be for older characters, and then it just gets even more realistic as the character gets even older. With more wrinkles and whatever. So these tend to be how I draw my eyes. So instead of me doing that incredibly fast, let's do some step-by-step. Which I don't do often, but let's do it. How do I remove the lining on the canvas? May I know how? Lining like square lines and all. Square lines? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen that before. Lining on the canvas. Do you mean this? Like this grid? You can just turn it off up on the top hip here. There should be a bar up at the top, so if you click on these, it gives you a bunch of lines and grids. You can just turn it off by clicking one of these. I'm sorry, I'm not super sure what you're talking about. Hopefully that was it, though. So, if you'd like to kind of know how I do my eyes, right, for all of my characters, I tend to draw younger characters more often than not. So for me, I like to start with a very tall eye, like this. If you're drawing along, you can kind of draw with me. I also don't tend to add in a lot of eyelashes, regardless of gender. I don't tend to add in a lot of eyelashes. So I kind of fake it and pretend that these are eyelashes. So I kind of add in these little feathered ends. No, it's different, then I'm sorry. I'm not super certain what you're talking about. So I kind of have this upper lid. For the bottom lid, you see how most of the peak is not directly in the middle of the eye, right? It's a little bit skewed off to the side. That's the truth with regular eyes as well. More realistic eyes as well. But I kind of seep that into my... I like to have this seeping into my stylized as well. So my peak on the bottom of my eye is on the opposite side. And again, I kind of like to stylize by adding a couple of extra lines underneath. Some people say that it kind of makes them look tired, but I think that's fun. I like to add a little bit of, like, extra lines underneath. And then my pupil is a big oval. or my iris is a big oval. To distinguish between characters, this isn't realistic at all, but to distinguish between characters, I changed the size of the pupil. One of my characters named Courtney has a very thin pupil. My main character Grayson has a really big pupil. My character Mo doesn't have any pupil at all. But you know, it depends on the person who you're drawing. Right? And I like to make my pupils pretty big. Same size as the iris as well. Do I use a digital pen or do you use a mouse? I use a tablet. I have a Cintiq 13 HD. It is a tablet with a screen on it. I wish I could draw with a mouse. I am not a mouse artist. I love mouse artists. They are so skilled and I could never. But I tend to draw with a pen. Alt G. I don't even know what that does. Alright. This is kind of how I draw my eye. I added a little hint of an eyelid sometimes up at the front. And then I give everybody perfect Instagram eyebrows. Does not matter who you are. I don't care. Unless if there's like a specific eyebrow that I have for some people. The eyebrow, the width of any of your eyebrows, generally there should be a peak 2/3 of the way of your eyebrow. So it kind of goes up at 2/3, then it folds in a different direction. I use a mouse, but my skills are a little worse. We're all in different stages. And besides, some mouse artists are like, you know, it depends on what you use. I also tend to like to add a little bit of extra lines at the end of my eyebrows. We're all at different stages, and we're all learning at different paces. I'm still learning, 100%. I don't think I'm a master at anything. There are things I like to draw, there are things I don't like to draw. I just have a lot of book knowledge, but I definitely have to improve still. Everybody's still improving. Nobody stops improving, truly. Yes, I like to add these little bits of extra lines at the end of my eyebrows to kind of give them a little bit of... Because, you know, if you look at your eyebrows in the mirror, right, they kind of fade out. They don't just hard stop unless you shave them that way. So I kind of like to add that in. And like I said, how I do most of my eyes are like... The older they get, the more realistic they get. So it's kind of like a slider for me. It's like, oh, you're like 20-ish years old? Then I'll make your eye just a little more realistic. Oh, you're like in your 80s? Your eyes are going to be like really, really realistic. Right? Isn't a mouse hard to use? It is. Because a mouse is a different position. If you write with a pencil, it's a different position than if you work with a mouse. It takes a lot of skills to work with a mouse. I could never. For some people, they also say that it makes their hand cramp. I could not. I actually have a friend who uses a trackpad. I could never. They're so good at it too. And I'm like, no. I don't know how you do that. So let me do an eye for how I would draw an older character. Almost the same deal as this. But it's a little bit flatter. I always tell my students in my classes that I think you can kind of think of it as a mountain. Same deal, I kind of feather out the ends of my lids. It's hard to use, but I don't have a digital pen and pad, so I have no choice and I have to use a mouse. That's okay. Some professionals even use a mouse. If you ever wanted to upgrade to a tablet, though, one day, there are tons of really cheap ones. You can get used ones as well. My first tablet was used and was 25 years old, so didn't have pen pressure, so don't worry. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you want to save your hand, I do recommend getting a tablet one day. Because you don't need anything ultra, ultra fancy to begin with. I really respect people who draw with a mouse, yeah, same. So I always tell my students it's kind of like a mountain, right? It's a peak at a different point, not directly in the middle, but off to the side a little bit. And then my bottom lid mirrors that, but it's a little bit smoother. Rather than like a point, now it's a curve. Sometimes I also add in the tear duct. That's actually with both of them. Sometimes I add the tear duct here too, depending on how I'm feeling. The number one thing you should remember, this is with realistic eyes too, your inner tear duct, you can draw it as a C. Your inner tear duct is like a C. Your outer tear duct is like a V. And your upper eyelid always goes over your bottom one. Keep up the great work. Yay! Made it. This is looking great, Jessie. Thank you, Yuri. I started with a mouse too, as Jessie said. You can always upgrade if you want to continue doing digital art. Yes, of course. I guess because, like, I didn't... Okay, I don't know if I ever count this. Oh, and then I do an eyelid. Sorry, an eyelid spans the entire thing. My pupils become circular as well, the older the character gets. If you're younger, you have an oval. If you're older, you have a circle. Same with the pupil. And then I start to add in under eye lids as well. And just the eyebrow. See, like, I had my first proper digital art program, because, like, when I was really young, I mean, like, I was, like, 7. When I was super young, younger than 7, probably. When I was super young, I used a mouse and I used MS Paint on my old, like, desktop computer, but this is, like, one of the very first MS Paints. And, like, I would just kind of draw whatever I wanted. I used, like, the shape tool and, like, just draw, like, random stuff. And then I dropped it for a really long time. And then I got back into it when I was 13-ish, yeah. And then I've got, like, a cracked version of Photoshop, and I used my dad's old, like, 25-year-old tablet that he used when he was in college, back in, like, the 80s or 90s. But yeah, so start with what you got and then upgrade. I didn't start with a Cintiq, I started with a tablet that I don't even know the title of. It must be hard drawing with a mouse with them constantly running away. Thank you. Thank you, RG. You can also try to draw with a mouse and it will be new art, possibly. You will have practice and it will be better. That's also true. Practice with a mouse and you can get better. I just find that I cramp up a lot when I use a mouse for long extended periods of time, so I'm like, it's better for my hand if I use a pen anyway. So these are kind of how I draw my eyes, right? These are the 2 eyes that I default to. Everybody kind of has defaults, but there are tons of different eyes that you can go for, right? Hello, Megan R. Welcome in. You missed the last 4 live streams. Thought I would drop by and show some support. Oh, thank you, Yuri. Yuri is one of our other excellent teachers. She teaches animation at our studio, the animation mentorship, and digital art. So if you ever wanted to pop in for some classes with her, definitely do it. I have to undo many times. The Control Z is your best friend. Let's talk about some other eyes that I see a lot as well. So now I'm just going to do a bunch of random eyes, and then I'm going to pick a couple and I'm going to color them in for you to show you how I would go through the process of drawing some eyes and how you can color them in, right? There's a lot of different styles of coloring eyes. Of course, I'll go through mine first, and then I'll do some others that I've seen around. One eye that I really love the look of that I never do, something a little more geometric. Super cartoony. I'm actually going to switch to the pen because it might make a little more sense. Yeah. So I tend to have super big lids, exaggerated lashes. And then the bottom lid actually connects to the eyelashes like this, which I think is such a cool, fun look. And the pupil is usually something weird. I love the look of eyes like these. I think it's such a fun, crazy look. Messing around with your eyes is so fun. I thought I would never draw so many eyes. It's good to practice. It's good to practice. The anatomy of an eye is very interesting, because with eyes I think are the thing that you can have the most fun with, right? Because it's like you kind of look at an eye and you can go, okay, I can mess around with this, like kind of play around with its anatomy. Like the people who meld the bottom lashes with the pupil, with like the the sclera itself, I think is so cool. Hello, Jessie, just joined. By the way, my username is my name backwards. Ah, hello, Isla. Welcome in. Glad you could come in. You kind of missed the whole theory part, but that's okay. Right? Some people even draw eyes that are just like, here's a circle. Then I draw a bigger circle on the inside. Little dot. And then just the eyebrow. Right? Some people just do that. There we go. That's an eye. You draw Kirby. That's his eyes. That's it. Right? Lots of different eyes. Technically, there is no incorrect way to do eyes. If you're doing realism, then there's probably an incorrect way to do an eye. But if otherwise, just go crazy, man. Another one of my favorite types of pens that I really, really love to do. How do you draw such smooth-looking eyes? Practice. I'm kidding. No, I'm not. Practice. You do them over and over and over, and soon enough you'll get here, but study a lot, kind of look at how you do some eyes. What's another eye that I really, really like? Because I see a lot of them. Because usually I like to just kind of twist in that realism in there. Right? Oh, yeah, I guess this is Kirby. Another Kirby eye would be like, you could just completely change the shape of the eye too. Circle? Who needs it? Just to like, go absolutely wild with it. This is another kind of Kirby eye that you see a lot, and the eyebrow goes like that. Just directly on top of it. This is a very Prince Fluff looking eye. Does anybody know who Prince Fluff is, please? Kirby's Epic Yarn. I love that game so much. I've played it 3 times. Any resources you know for drawing eyes? Google? You look up eyes and you Google it? I think that's about as much as I do. Sorry, that sounded sarcastic. But most of the time you just kind of look up references. I find that I work from realism and then go from there. Usually how I just draw anything is you look at photo reference and then find some techniques that you think look good and mix them all up together. Let me just move some of these out of the way. It's 447. You know what, because I think it might take me a little bit longer than I think it will. I watched the Kirby anime. How many episodes? I've watched all 100, and then and then I rewatched them. I could quote some of the Kirby anime. Mike Wazowski. You're correct. Mike Wazowski just has a really big circular eye like this. He just kind of, you know what I mean. That's Mike Wazowski. Actually, that kind of looks like the character from Jujutsu Kaisen. I don't know his name. Sukuna? I think that's it. Pinterest has anything you could possibly want. Another good resource. Start from realism by using IRL references. Simplify as much as you want, and then go from there. Pretty much. I would just kind of... I always start with realism. Think of... Okay, here's me going on another tangent. But I'm gonna start the eye that I'm gonna color, so then we can actually get on with that. So let me do another layer. Come on. There we go. So let me just draw an eye real quick. It's just going to be this one again. I'm going to show you some ways that you can color them in. Alright, so this one's not going to be step by step. I'm just going to draw this real quick first. So if I start by drawing an eye, right? Eyes have lids. They have 3D planes. Things to think about. Bottom lid, upper lid, eyebrow, right? We have lots of things that come with drawing eyes. Right, but how do we color them? I'll get into that in a moment. There's a lot of different ways you can color eyes. I'm going to start with how I color eyes because it tends to be very, very simplistic. I have very simple eyes. And then afterwards I'll show you some more rendered ways that you can do eyes. I might mimic Alyssa, how she does her eyes. I find almost all my references there. Hello. Christopher, welcome. Mike Wazowski. I think I watched all episodes. I watched them on your 3DS. Good choice. This looks like the third and fourth eye of Sukuna. Yep. What about crying? Are you rendering this eye? Yes. Crying. So tears. I can get into tears when I do the coloring. I can definitely do that. But let me start with coloring first. So we're going to do my own eye. I'm just going to color in the flats first. Right? When you color in eyes, by the way, 99% of the time your eye should not be perfectly white. Let me actually color in the skin behind it first. Your eyes should not be perfectly white. Same with teeth, same with anything else you draw. They shouldn't be perfectly white, because your eyes, like, nothing on your skin is perfectly white, right? So you can kind of make it a little bit yellower, because that is kind of what color our eyes are. I'm going to go for a funky color for the eyes. I'm going to go with, like, a crazy bluish kind of color. This is the color of different OC I have. What was I going to say? I had a thing. Yeah, I was going to go on a tangent about styles. So what I always tell people is that, like, when you're thinking of styles or anything like that, generally what you start with is realism, right? I call realism the base for everything, because usually you start with that and then you go crazy from there, right? Like, you don't normally... let's turn this into a multiply layer. Again, stealing more of Alyssa's techniques. Right? Because when you start with realism, it's like realism, and then you mess with it to create different rule sets. Every style has a different quote-unquote rule set. That's what I always say. Like every artist has a quote-unquote rule set for their own art style. And then... But they all kind of start with realism. And then they work their way from there, right? Like, if you have even if you look at anime, like, if you look at anime eyes, it's very much like the eye itself is quite realistic, and then they just add on a bunch of stuff on top of it. Like, they get rid of the 5 eyes across rule, and they work on it from there. Or they get rid of how eyelashes are drawn and they draw it their own way. It's more methodical. They add extra sparkles in the eyes, right? It all starts with realism, and then you work your way from there. That's why I always say get photo reference and then add a style on top of it. Okay, that's enough of tangents. So, I am a very hard cell shader. I like to cell shade a lot. The first thing that I always do is just kind of mess around with the pupil. I like to have half of it on top be a bit of a darker color. I just kind of pick the color of the eye, turn it down a little bit. Actually, I want to go a bit closer to this blue. There we go. It's a little bit fuller. Color in about half of it like that. Leave a little bit on the bottom. Then I add in a bit of a light, extra light color. For my pupils, I never make them perfectly black, which is not realistic at all. I like to make them a dark kind of like color, a darker version of whatever the main iris color is. Then usually all I do, I create a new layer, make it into a clipping mask, and change the layer style to multiply. Nope, not add, multiply. There we go. You should be looking over at my layers for a second. So I have a clipping mask, which you just click off this box, turn the layer into multiply, and then change the layer name, SH for shade. Oops. There we go. And then I usually choose kind of a blue, usually a light blue, and just add the shadows on top. Your upper lid is generally what causes shadows to the bottom of the eye. There's usually a little bit of shadow under your eyebrow as as well. And on your underlid here. Usually that's it. Usually that's all I do. I don't really like to... Well, I wish I did, but like I don't really have a need to go really all out with eyes. But that tends to be as much as I do. And then on my line art layer, this is where I use the bright white. Oops. Oh, it's because it's a multiply. Usually it wouldn't be. I'm just going to add that extra layer though. And then I add on a little dot. That's my eye shine. That's usually all I do for my eyes. I don't go crazy with them. But let's render one for fun. Let's do that. Oh, look at that without the lines. It's so weird. So let me... No, excuse me. Control-C, Control-V. Ha! So, let's render one now. Let's go kind of crazy with one. Let's do it. T2. What is this? What layer are you? Oh, you're the eye shine. Sorry, I'm renaming this layer so I don't have to worry about it. What is cell shading? I hear my friends say that often. It's like a less smooth but more clear. Not necessarily. So let me talk about that. Cell shading, 1L by the way. Cell shading versus soft shading. I know I did this lesson with my students before. If there's any of my students in chat, let's see if you remember. Let's just do 2 circles over here. Cell shading is technically like a graphics term in terms of like game graphics or whatever. Cell shading is very hard-edged, and what it is in terms of like digital graphics is it's taking all the information of a shadow and condensing it into like a single block of color. If you've played Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, that's what the shader is doing. Is it's taking all the information of what would normally be a soft shadow and condensing it all into blocks of shadow. So that's what cell shading is. It's kind of blocks of shadow rather than blended. Yes, so it's when you don't blend in your things. Soft shading would be, I like to use the G pen to shade softly, because I like texture. Oops, that would be darker actually. There we go. So usually, your soft shading would be if you blended in everything, right? Normally I do that differently, but oh well. We don't have a bajillion hours. If you'd like to see a stream where we do some shading, some soft shading, cell shading, everything, let us know. Gladly do that. So this would be considered cell, this would be considered soft. Right? Let me actually, because you would still have a little bit of strong edge here. Yeah, so cell is on the left, soft is on the right. Is the soft shading all on the same layer? Oh, that's just because I want to do it fast. You don't have to do it the way I did. But I tend to shade it all in the same layer. I know people hate that. Alyssa hates that. But I do it anyway. You know what? I'll just keep it here. Why not? These are all on whack layers. Now all my layers are disorganized. Oh, well. Okay. T2. Let's render this one out. I'm actually just going to copy this over too, because I did all my flat colors here. Ooh, good work. All right. Just a second while I organize more layers. Now, when I render things, I tend to do that layer thing first. Right, so the multiply layer, shadow, first. So it's very, very similar in terms of that. Actually, you know what? Let's go all out. Let's do my actual shading method. I do it subtractive. I do a subtractive way. So I would color in all of this first, and then I would erase what I don't need. Or I would make a copy of this. No, release the clipping. Hang on. I am losing my mind. So, let's try this one more time. I would take the original color layer. I would take it. I'd copy it. Put it onto a new layer. Right? Now there's a whole new layer there. With this shading layer that is on multiply, I fill in the entire thing. Right? The entire thing is now a shadow layer. I take these two layers, so this extra shadow layer and this extra color layer, I merge them. Now this is a whole new layer of just shadow, and I would erase all of it. I would erase everything that I don't need. Right? So I'd go in and just erase everything that I don't need. Is this what people refer to when you do a more painterly style? Possibly. Honestly, I'm not too sure about that one myself. When you paint with digital work, it's usually like if you're working closer to how you would do, how a painter would work, that's a more painterly style from what I've seen, but everyone's works differently. I know some people do it differently than I do, some people do it differently than Alyssa does, people do it differently than my boss does, Faye, etc, etc, etc. People have different styles of how they work. That's the beauty of art. There is no concrete way. Like, I know you're watching a tutorial and I'm talking to you, like, how I would do stuff, but truthfully, there is no 100% correct way to do anything. It's just what you prefer. Truly. Like, in terms of stylizing, anyway. Okay. So I would erase all those lines first. I can just edit all this, just in case there's some extra shadows I want to mess around with. From that, I would take these two layers, my original color and this new shadow layer, I would put them into a folder. You can copy this, paste it, and now it's created a whole merged layer of the colors. Oh, I would have added in the layer of my lines too. Why is this above here? That should not be there. Okay. I would have added in my lines too. So again, Control-C, Control-V. No. It's because I didn't have it on. Control-C, Control-V. There we go. Now there's a whole merged layer. And now I would just blend. Like, I'm very disorganized with my painting. Like, I find that other people have, like, this ultra organized way of doing it. I'm not. I tend to like to just blend everything in once I have all this. What I'm doing right now, I mentioned it in the Valentine's Day stream. This is called... Oops, that's too dark. Sorry, I just brain farted. This is called ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion? Subsurface scattering. That's the one! So this is subsurface scattering. Ambient occlusion is another one. So this is subsurface scattering, and what that is basically just the shine of your... or the translucency of your skin peeking through. And all you need to do is just take your brush of choice and just blend it in. Until it kind of smooths out a little bit more. And I make sure that the lines are in this layer as well, so then I can blend them in too. Right? I like to have it all on one layer, so I don't have to worry about it. So it's all here in one spot. I'll hear the blur tool. I actually don't like the blur tool. I find that the blur tool makes things muddy in comparison to if you had something like the G Pen. I only use the blur tool if I need to blur out a like specific point. Jessie, these are awesome. Would it be possible to see a pair of eyes together similar in style of color? Yeah, for sure. I'll do that soon. It's 5:04, so that means we got to do our hourly plug. So if you don't really know what our studio is about, we are technically a a school, like a online art school. So if you would like to get some paid lessons by me or by Alyssa or any of the other lovely teachers, Arunia just popped in chat, hello. But she is in there as well. As part of our lovely teaching staff, with Faye and Yuri, who popped in very briefly. So if you would like to check out those classes, that's the link in the description. And the other social medias that we have up here, that is Discord, Instagram, and Facebook. So you can check out all of those links in the description. This entire file, flattened, will be available on Discord for you to download. Take all yours. But if you would like my working files to see how all of my layers work, that will be on Patreon. So if you'd like to support us on Patreon, all of my working files, all of Alyssa's working files, and discounts on our classes are available on Patreon, depending on what tier you sign up to. But the discounts on our classes are a very limited spot, so if you would like to take advantage of that, make sure that you do before these spots are gone. Okay, back to the stream. I guess digitally you can copy, paste, flip, and then move the circle portion of the eye as long as the shadows are different and things are slightly different. I would disagree. So let me talk about that while I continue to render for a moment. Monda-chan, hello. How to make this brush? You don't make it. It's actually a default. A G Pen is a default brush that is in MediBang, so it should already be there. But yes, copy, paste, and then flip only works if the eye is exactly the same on both sides. So if the person is facing perfectly straight forward, you can do that. But if the person is not facing perfectly straight forward, it doesn't work. Because you have other angles of the eyes to worry about. Because the angle of the eye changes depending on the direction that the person is facing. I will do a little bit. I just realized I forgot to do that when I was talking about the angles. Oh, wonderful job, me. I'll talk about that after I finish rendering this eye. But yes, you can do that if they're facing perfectly forward, straight forward, but I wouldn't if they aren't. For me, I tend to like to have a little bit of the quote-unquote brush stroke effect still in there. Kind of want to go a bit darker in some areas. A realistic way of painting is that you would never have black. You would never use black. Like digitally painting. It's like you wouldn't have black anywhere. That's a very stylistic choice, though. I use black all the time. I wouldn't use black to shade. That's one thing I wouldn't do. But if you're, like, accentuating lines or whatever, that's up to you. And hello, Elsa. Welcome once again. I tend to like to accentuate my eyelids. The bottoms as well. AKA, I really like the way that Alyssa does it, and I am kind of melding with that. Except I don't tend to add very extreme eyelashes. I'll add an eyelashes if I must, but most of the time I don't. Oh, and you would have a little bit on the side here as well. Number one rule, another rule you should probably keep in mind for yourself is that your upper lid goes over top of your bottom one. So generally there will be more shadow on the underside of your lids compared to the overside. So what exactly does the G Pen do? It really doesn't do anything. I just like the texture of it. The G Pen has more of a texture compared to the, if you can see that, it has more of a like rough texture compared to the pen. You'll notice that I have the square brush here, and it doesn't work the same way on MediBang than it does in Photoshop. So I don't use it, but normally I would be blending with the square rather than with the G. But yeah, not much different. It doesn't really do much. So another thing you'll probably notice me doing is that I am blending in my lines along with everything else. That's why I blend. Sorry. This is why I merge everything on the single layer, because I'm blending them all in now, including the lines. I like to mix in my lines with my paint, with my shading, rather than get rid of them altogether. That's a very stylistic choice as well. If I'm really, really rendering, then I get rid of my lines altogether. Alyssa loves to keep her lines in. That's all up to her, though. I prefer not to. I like to keep them out, but for the sake of time, I'm kind of keeping them in. Just remembering where my shadows are going. My shadows are up top, so I want my eyes to keep that top layer of shadow. Alright guys, I'm gonna go. It's pretty late, want to try something out. Maybe see you later on Discord. Bye Pardeep. Thank you for joining. With shading clothes, do you shade like in a darker version of the color of the clothing, or would you use a muddy blue? Depends on what I'm choosing to do. So the muddy blue is the blue that I use is with a multiply layer. I wouldn't do that on its own. This goes for everything, by the way. Clothes, skin, whatever. I would truthfully only use the... It's like, can you use a darker color of the original one? Yes. I wouldn't just have it directly going down, though. Like, if you have, like, a square like this, say if your shirt was, like, a blue like this, I wouldn't go directly down like that. It's too dull. I would go a little bit down and to the right, and then also go towards this deeper blue. So if my light blue was like this, I wouldn't go directly down, because that's very dull. It doesn't look that great. So instead, I would go down and to the right, and then a little bit towards this deeper blue. This feels more full, right? You can kind of see the difference between the colors. Because this is shading with black. This is shading with a deeper blue, right? That's a little bit different. Multiply layers do that for you, which is why I tend to prefer... I've started to use multiply layers more than actually rendering in colors, because it tends to be just a little bit faster. Right, so if I zoom out, you can kind of see that it's blending in a little bit more. You notice that I'm not working like this, though, right? I'm not super zoomed in like this, because you don't need to be. Zoom in enough where you can see the whole thing, but zoom out, or zoom in so you can, like, still know what you're doing, but stay zoomed out so you can see the entire thing. It's better to have a non-zoomed in idea of what you're drawing compared to if you have an ultra zoomed in version, because then you're focusing on one spot and you're like, oh no. You zoom out and you're like, oh man, I did this wrong. And that's your own fault. I'm kidding. I mean, technically it is, but you know what I mean. Stay zoomed out. Also improves posture. So I'm just kind of shading in the tear ducts a little bit, or rendering them a little bit more. And again, I like to kind of leave in my things a little bit more. And now because everything is blended together, I can just add the shines directly on top. You can add in, if you really want to go stylized, you can add in some extra shines on the bottom too. Just go kind of wild with it. How many shines you add in is so up to you. Like, you can go absolutely wild with it if you want to. Another stylized thing that I see people do is have their eyelashes, or their eyebrows be dark at the end and then get lighter as they go toward, like, have it in a gradient. Have it lighter as it goes towards the end of the eyebrow. I see a lot of doll artists do that, actually. I usually like to do it too. But blend it in with lines instead of straight blending it in. I would have that going in a different direction. These should be going like that instead. MediBang does not want me to do that, though. She's screaming at me. You're going too fast. Yep, and then feather it out at the end there as well. At this 2/3 mark is where your eyebrow hairs change direction as well. So in this first 2/3 section, they go this way, and then in this last third, they go this way. So they change direction. A friend of mine always says to never zoom past 100%. That can work if you'd like it to. I don't have like a specific zoom that I don't go past, but for me it's like, it depends how detailed I want it to be. Alright. So that's kind of how I'd blend in an eye, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, there's no such thing as boy's eye or girl's eye in my eyes. Just eyes. Straw eyes, bro. We all got them. We all got eyelashes. Realistic eyes tend to all look the same anyway. And then the last little thing that you can do is add highlights. Some extra shines here and there, so generally I add them on the top of the lid here. Oops. You notice how my lightest color was not perfectly white. It was something like that. All I'm doing, by the way, when I blend, is I'm not using the blur tool. What I'm doing is I am Alt. I don't know if you can actually see that little prompt that pops up in the top corner. Can you? Oh, you can't. Okay, so all I'm doing is I'm hitting Alt. Alt switches to your eyedropper tool. I hit Alt, and then I blend. I hit Alt, and then I blend. I'm constantly picking between colors to smooth out just what I have there. You better always zoom to 101% just to spite them. It'd be kind of funny. But yeah, zoom in however much you want, but like, if you zoom in way, way too much like this, then you're just gonna make yourself upset all the time. It's easier just to have it like that. Maybe I will, indeed. Alright, looks like I have to. So those are my eyes that are kind of blended in. Let me just put this all in a folder so that I can make this a little bit more organized. Okay, there we go. Look at all those layers. So disorganized. So we mentioned wanting 2 eyes, and we also mentioned wanting tears. I could probably do tears on top of this eye. So, yeah. Let me just change this name as well to render. This is how I try to organize everything. Tears are funky. I'm kind of figuring out tears as well, but I do quite like drawing them. Most of the time how I see people do it is kind of have the shape of the tear that you want. I like big blobby tears as well, by the way. You kind of shade in the tear with a darker color. Then you can kind of add in the shadow of whatever's underneath it. Leave a little bit of leeway around that shadow. I have a very non-concrete way of drawing tears. You kind of blend in the edge of the tears as well. So you kind of have a hard-edged blend. Because it is water. Water is very shiny, so you want a very hard edge. And then you can add in your highlights on top of that. That's kind of how I do like intense tears. Another way that I've seen people do it is if you add in a track of darker color, like this is a little more realistic. If you add in a track of darker color, and then very, very harshly add in a streak of light. Like that. That's another way that I see people do it. So this is a little bit more realistic way to do tears, because it's like a track of light. Kind of like that. I would make the track a little bit darker, actually. Well, now I'm just kind of rendering it more than I should be. Yeah. How would you blend with a transparent object? What do you mean? Like a glass? Like glass? Something like that? If that's the case, then that's probably for a different stream. Because I do want to focus on eyes. I don't want to focus a little bit. I don't want to go too off track. But more likely than not, you would have to rely on the shadows that it casts. And you would also have to rely on the distortion of the object around it. Right, just add in a bit more reflections. What was the final thing that I was requested? It was... We have a little bit closer to a half hour left as well, so we're at 5:22. I'll do another plug at about half hour down the line. But another thing that I realized I forgot to do was... Let's just make this canvas a lot bigger. Let's go like... add another 2,000 pixels. Yeah. Whoops! What? Hi. Okay. Sorry, just trying to move everything out of the way. Actually, let's move this one down so I can have it closer to everything else. When you're drawing eyes on people, right? If you have somebody's head, when they're facing directly forward, yes, you can have one eye and you can mirror it if you would like to. Because more likely than not, they are kind of facing the same direction, right? You can't do that if they're not facing directly forward, because you're going to have distortion with one of the eyes. Oh, I have to leave. It's 1 AM here. Thank you for the stream, though. Always so fun and helpful. See you next Friday. See you, Duru. Thank you for joining. So again, when you have the person looking straight forward, having the eyes both kind of the same, and you just mirror them, that's totally okay. But if you have a person who's facing off to the side, you cannot do that. Now, here's my one rule of thumb. Here's a couple things that I see other people doing, whether it's friends or students or anything like that. Let me just draw a nose as well. So if I draw one eye, that's kind of facing off to the side. 3/4, right? The other eye is not going to be the same width, right? So if I just take this eye and like and move it over, you can't do that. It looks a little bit weird. I wouldn't do that ever. Right? But I also wouldn't take this eye, Control-C, Control-V, move it over, and then just make it smaller. Right? That's also not correct. Right? The rule of thumb, let me just delete this whole layer. The rule of thumb, when you're drawing eyes from different angles, the height of, make that smaller, your eye always remains the same. The width is what changes. Right? So this eye, if I kind of go across like this, the height will remain the same, but your width will change. So this eye will be thinner than this one. Right? You notice that this eye is this width, this eye is this width. The eye that is farthest away from the subject, or from you, the eye that is farther away from you, will be the one that is thinner in terms of width. Sometimes they'll be hiding behind certain aspects of the face as well. People tend to struggle the most with a 7/8. Sometimes it's literally just the eyelashes that pop up. On the side over here, so not even the... This is kind of quick, so it's not beautiful, but you have the nose kind of popping off like that. Sometimes it's just the eyelashes that show up, not even the eye, because it's hidden behind the nose. Remember that the whole head curves. We'll be going over the anatomy of faces next week, actually, because that's the anatomy stream. Like full human anatomy. That one is going to be a full step-by-step stream, by the way, guys. So that's kind of what's going to be happening. So just the eyelashes are showing on that one. But the height of your eyes should always remain the same. The width is what changes. So let's draw a pair of eyes now. Trying to move everything out of the way so I can do more things. So let's draw a pair of eyes now. It's a little small. Let's do that bigger. I guess I could have just made it larger. Oh well. So again, kind of that mountain peak. And the lower hill. I guess you can call it a hill. Then I'll do like a fake bridge of the nose here. And then this eye, because it's kind of a 3/4. Same height for both eyes. But a different width. Right, so this height, this one is a bit wider than this one, but it is the same height. Right, the height does not change. It is just, oops, just the width that changes. And that's 5:30, so that means there's about a half hour left. And this will be the final plug for the night. So if you don't know much about our studio, we are a studio. We're an art school, and I teach different classes, as well as Alyssa and Arina and all our other lovely staff members here at Wayne Canvas. We all teach different classes, so I teach our mentorship, and cartooning and animes. If you ever wanted to sign up for a class, you can find that link in the description with our studio name and our social medias that you can kind of see up there. Well, that you can see. There are our Discord, Instagram, and Facebook. Those are all different social medias that you can follow us on. Discord is where I will be uploading this flattened image for you to download and keep it. It's all yours. But if you would like a working file, be sure to join us on Patreon. And you can check out our class discounts that we have over there, as well as get my working files along with Alyssa's working files and everybody else's working files that you may want to see, and get some behind the scenes peeks and some critiques that we can give. And the class, oh my god, the class discount is in limited spots. So if you would like that discount for everything that we offer, make sure that you grab it before the spots are all gone. So let's get back to this then. Again, just drawing out the eye first. Eyes first. Right, because I know that I'm going to be rendering them, I'm not spending too long on my quote-unquote lines. I think I'm going to go crazy for these ones, so I'm just going to add, like, crazy amount of lines and details and whatever within them. Alright. Have that. Let's do a different skin tone. Alright, and like I mentioned before, you shouldn't have your eyes as perfectly white. You can usually have them as a dull yellow of some kind that looks white against the skin tone, but it isn't perfectly white if you color picked it. And always add in your tear ducts on the side, which is like a pale pink, maybe slightly more reddish. It's a little bit too pink. Right, fill that in. I'm gonna do purple. Why not? Let's do some purple eyes. I want to do some fun colors. Just pretend that they're, and like before. I'm gonna change this to a multiply layer as well. Oops. Add in that darker color. I like to add in the shadows before anything else. For just the iris though, nothing else. You know what? Let's go with, like, a weird pupil color. Yeah. Again, remember, if it's a fantasy eye, you don't have to stick to anything. Nothing realistic. Who needs it? What about eyes that are not human? Any eye that you'd request, Pex? Any specific kind of eye that I can quickly do? Then I'm just gonna put these 2 layers. Actually, no, I was going to. I guess I can just make it a clipping with the blue. If I'm just gonna merge it all anyway. Chameleons and lizards. Now, the thing with chameleons and lizards is, like, all of them kind of have... Like, they don't necessarily... Well, I mean, everything has a tear duct. No, not everything. No, lizards have... The thing with lizards is that they're... Or anything reptilian is that they kind of have... Chameleons are strange because they're like 99% lid. Right? A chameleon would be like... You have the whole thing here, but all it's really got is like layers of skin around it and then just a little hole here. Like a little bit of a slit like this. This is all that it gets. It's all just one kind of pupil there with like layers of skin around it. Other lizards are like it's one big iris like this with like a little bit of its outer lids showing. An upper lid and a lower lid that is like extra pronounced. Crocodiles and geckos have those weird pupils, right? It's the same deal as this, like the circle with like a little bit of the sideways lids popping up. I know geckos have pupils that are kind of like this, right? So they're kind of funky shaped. I think frogs have a sideways pupil like that. Toads and stuff. Same with goats. And then alligators have this thin. I'll just leave that one. Have that thin pupil. It's all about looking at references. Little did you know is that I was staring at a reference the whole time I was talking about that. So, but yeah. So it is really just about observing. Oops. Let's turn that into a normal layer. And let's switch this one to normal so I can get this color back. Okay. Yeah, it's all about, like, references. Nothing too wild. I always say that it's like, oh, you gotta look up references, but it's the truth. Right? I'm gonna leave these on. Let's have them glowing a little bit. Do you know what we can do? Let's have the shadows coming from the side this time. So that means that this will be kind of doused in more shadow here. And because I'm blending it in, I'm not going too smooth with my shadows anyway. Because it's a multiply, a trick to get that good, subsurface scattering. Sorry, my brain died. A good trick to get that good color for subsurface scattering is literally just pick up the original skin tone. Outline kind of the edges of the shadows. There's a more realistic way to do it, but like this, I tend to think looks kind of cool. Let's move all those in here. Control C, Control V. And now you have a whole layer where everything is merged. And now I just take my G pen and I blend it all together. Line art and all. Quote unquote line art. It's not technically line art because it's not very smooth. But I like to lay down all of my colors and shadows first before, or most of them anyway. I might change up a couple of things as I go along, but I like to lay down an approximation before I do anything else. The pear, so neat to see how different the shadows fall. Yeah. The planes of the face are very different. Well, everybody has planes of the face. We'll talk about that next week, when I go over anatomy. When I say I'm going over anatomy, I mean I'm going over facial anatomy and body anatomy, so I'm going to be doing both. It's a lot of measurements. So if you're joining that stream, bring a notebook. Unless you join the Discord, then you can just download all my notes. But there's a lot of measurements when it comes to anatomy, unfortunately. I'm sorry for all of you who hate math. But that is kind of how it goes. But don't worry, a lot of the measurements are relativity. And we'll get into that. I'll talk a bit about that as well. Anatomy lessons tend to be my favorite ones. Right, so you just kind of blend in everything. So this is an ultra exaggerated way that you would add subsurface scattering. Like I'd like to add a lot of it. If you wanted something more realistic, there probably wouldn't be much subsurface. Or, no, that's right. Not too much subsurface scattering around the eyes at all. The areas with the most subsurface scattering are the tip of the nose, the chin, and your fingertips. And your ears, right. Your ears are a really, really big subsurface area. Oopsies. I'm also a very linear artist, I've been told. So, like, I know a lot of people like to go back and forth, but I'm like, it's like, gotta finish this part first, then I can go to this part, and then I can do other things. Some people like to go back and forth. I tend to like to work on one area, then move on, and if I find that it's not complete, then I go back. Another stylistic choice that I like to do is I like to fade out the corners of the eyes sometimes, if I'm coloring. Kind of like that, so I add in a little bit of extra color. Sorry if I go quiet for extended periods of time again, this means I'm focusing a little bit, as I kind of smooth everything out a little bit more. Usually when I cell shade eyes, if I want to do extremely fancy eyes, then I like add in a lot of weird shapes into the iris. I'm just blending this, but I'd normally add in a lot of weird shapes when it comes to like the eye shines or the iris itself. Yeah, it's a lot of blending, just kind of back and forth. I know some people like using a blending tool. That works fine. It's just I don't really know how to use one. I don't really like to. I kind of like the rudimentary. Let's just go back and forth with the color. Never forget that your tear ducts are shiny. They are like... They are wet, right? They are where tears come from. So it is a wet area of the eye. I mean, the whole eye is wet. It should be anyway. But remember that for when you are shading them in. Let's do some fun shapes. Let's do some... As if they got a ring light somewhere. Why not? Let's do it. And I'm gonna do the Alyssa thing with eyelashes. Nice and thin for the lowers. Remember when I mentioned you can do the... Actually, if you were here, you can do the kind of crossing technique with the two eyelashes. Like that. There should actually be some extra shadow coming down here, down the side, the bridge of the nose. And I usually like to leave in that kind of rough texture. Because this eye is kind of covered up by the bridge of the nose, there's a little bit more shadow covering it up. In comparison to this eye, which has a little bit more of the light. I usually do my highlights last, by the way, so I always save it to the end. I don't like having it directly on the top because, or I do it last because there's usually other shadows that I gotta add in as well. And it's kind of hard. Why did I pronounce it like that? It's kind of hard to add in the lights on top of the shadows that are already complete, I find. I was trying to figure out what you meant by the thing I do. I see now. Yeah. Eyelashes. Yeah, Alyssa tends to add in very intense eyelashes. I don't do that often. Just remember how there are a lot of things to think about when you do eyes. There's a set of tutorials, well, not tutorials, but like set of like reference thingies that I see some people always reference back to. It's the Etherington brothers. I can never pronounce their names. But you should be able to find them. Because their series is always how to think when you draw, never how to draw, but how to think. Which is like how I always teach. It's like, it's never really how to, it's how to think while you do it, because if you think about it, you can apply it to a different style rather than sticking within a singular style. You can apply it to different art styles, sorry, instead of sticking to a singular style and getting stuck in that way. So again, like, kind of referencing back to that, how you'd want to think about your eyes, right? Think about the folds that your eyes create, your eyelids, the shapes of the face, the planes of the face. all that fun stuff. And that's kind of how you determine the shadows of your eyes. How the light hits it. Because the light will hit differently, depending on where your eyes are. It's very sunsetty, now that I'm kind of blending it in more. Okay, once I render in these ones, I'm almost done here, but once I render in these ones, I think the stream is over, but we're almost done. We're almost done. Thank you for sticking through if you've been here the whole time. So thanks for kinda sitting through me. Sitting through the whole thing. Even if you just have me on in the background. That's still pretty rad. That you haven't gotten sick of my voice yet. Just adding back in those tear ducts. So this is me kind of adding in, or like refining extra details. Oops. Adding in more refined details. Not ultra clean, but clean enough to get the idea across. Now, because this eye is covered up by the shadow, there actually won't be too many eye shines with it because it is mostly covered. It's mostly in shadow. The shadow should be a little bit more intense because the eye is shiny. So the shadow should be a little bit harder edged rather than blended in completely. There's a thing that some people do where they have their thing like that instead. I don't feel like doing that though. They have their eye shine a little bit like a translucent white that goes over everything, which is fairly realistic. It's just I don't feel like doing that right now. I also don't really know how to explain that one. I don't want to teach anything that I don't really know how to explain. And once again, because we're pretty well done rendering this one, we can add in the bottom lashes. Alright, I gotta do something else. This was fun and informative. Thanks. Of course. Thanks for joining, Marinus Monk. Thanks for joining in. Hi. Hello. Welcome in to the stream. We're almost done here, but thank you for popping in. Oops. I like to keep my if I do add eyelashes, I like to keep them nice and thin if I'm doing the eyes up close like this. But if not, then I kind of make my eyelashes intense, a little more intense as well. Yeah, because that shouldn't technically be there because the light isn't hitting there. That was an intense voice crack. I'm from Turkey. Ooh. Far. But thank you for popping in from Turkey. Or from Canada. We're a whole studio of artists based in Canada. Alright. As I fix up these eyebrows a little bit, remember that they changed the lashes, or the hairs of the brow will change directions. About 2/3 of the way in. Try to blend in the skin tone a little bit with the brow to kind of imitate the way that the hairs would feather out on the upper brow of a person. Alright, so that kind of blends it in there. Even though this is kind of zoomed in, realize that I can see both of the eyes still. I'm not completely zoomed into the eyebrow like, not completely zoomed into the eyebrow like this, right? That's far too close. We don't want to zoom in that much, right? Because if we do, then we can get lost in all of our details. We don't want that to happen. Alright, then the last step is just to add in all the highlights. Because we have the nose in here, the bridge of the nose in there a little bit, we also have the bridge of the nose to worry about when we add in our highlights. So because the light is coming from here, that's where the most concentrated light will be. So I just blend it back into the skin. Those concentrated highlights will be focused on this side of the face. I should have added in the eyelashes last, so then I could blend in the top lids a bit better, a little bit easier. Oh well, I reap what I sow. Some people, this is something that I like to do as well actually, some people like to add in the highlight on the inside of the eye there too. Technically this doesn't make a lot of sense, but it kind of adds a fun little layer of stylization. I think Alyssa does this too. I keep mentioning Alyssa. Anyway. Yeah. You can kind of add in a little highlight there, same with underneath here. This is a very stylized thing, like the eye highlights. Does it make sense? Technically no, but I think it looks kind of cool. It would only really make sense if it was like, if the light was coming from a certain direction, but... in this case, let's pretend that it is. concentrated one. That would be if it was like at the top of the nose here. The tip of the nose would have a very concentrated highlight. Same with a bit of the cheek over here. The cheekbones tend to have very concentrated highlights. Depending on the person. That's usually due to makeup. Alright. So that's kind of 2 eyes rendered out afterwards. And with that, we're gonna call the stream because that is 6 o'clock. So look at that. We had a whole page of notes. Fun stuff. I love your art. Thank you. But yes, thanks so much for joining, everyone. This was a lot of fun. Again, if you don't know too much about our channel, be sure to check us out on all of the little social media channels that we have up here. So that is on Discord, Instagram, and Facebook. On Discord, if you join our channel, which is in the link in the description, or our server, link in the description, I will be uploading this entire file flat so you can download it, take a look at my notes, do whatever you want with it. But if you would like all my layers and all of my working files, those will be up on our Patreon, depending on the tier that you sign up for. So if you check out our Patreon, also link in the description, then you can get all my access to my working files, get some sneak peeks to things that we are creating, get some critiques from our instructors, including me and Alyssa. And we also have a tier that gives you a discount on the classes that we offer, because we do teach as well. We are all teachers. So one of our Patreon tiers gives you a huge discount on those, but it is also in limited quantities. So if you want to reap those benefits, make sure that you sign up quick before it is gone. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you to everybody who was joining. And we'll see you next week. Next week will be anatomy. That's also with me. So we will be going over both full body proportions, and we'll be going over facial proportions, which hopefully should take us the full 2 hours. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. Can you please do a video on blending and skin, maybe? We'll try to we'll do that in the future. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye!